Hello, everyone, and welcome to the People Strategy Forum. Our guest today has helped shape how we connect literally and figuratively. Dr. Yoram Solomon was part of the team that brought Wi-Fi to life many years ago, but what really sets him apart is how deeply he understands and connects to people. I mean, as we're going to be talking about today, he has written many books. But through his research on trust and creativity and high performance, Yoram's uncovered something powerful. It's not perks or policies that unlocks potential. It's trust specifically. He's worked across startups and boardrooms and battlegrounds that today has become just the working place for startups and innovation overall. So if you want a workplace where the top talent stays and your people thrive and innovation actually happens, this is a conversation that you've been waiting for. So let's welcome Dr. Yoram Solomon. Welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here with you, Sam.
Yes, and so one of the things that Yoram, I'd just love to dig into a little bit more is to understand a little bit about your background. I mean, you have as we mentioned, you're a well-developed author. I mean, you've written many books, and you have a new one that's just been released or is on its path. And so, but what started you? What got your curiosity around trust in helping leaders?
Well, technology. I started with technology. I was always an innovator. I was always coming up with those crazy ideas. I believe, I have nine registered patents, and quite a few in the hopper. And I remember once somebody came to me, an executive, and said, "This is a great idea. This happens once in a lifetime, um, because great ideas are accidental." And I'm starting to think, and I go, no, they're not accidental. I had a lot of great ideas, and that kind of made me wonder: are ideas really accidental? And as I started researching, and at that time, my focus was on innovation, and then I left that company. I started helping companies innovate. And what I realized when I did my PhD research was that the question I was answering actually was, why are people so much more creative when they work for small startup companies than for large mature companies? Because I worked in both environments and I could feel the difference. And it came down, if I have to summarize how many did I have there? 394 pages or something of a dissertation. It really comes down to two words: innovation culture. So it really starts with the culture. And so for a few years, I've been researching, I've been speaking, writing about innovation culture. And it was until one day that I met with a company and that had a major innovation issue, I would say. And we started digging, and I started talking about the innovation culture process and framework. And when I asked them questions, the answer to every question of why can't you, for example, give autonomy? Because I found a correlation of 67% between autonomy and creativity. So why don't you give autonomy? And it came down to, we don't really trust the employees that they will not abuse the autonomy.
Hmm.
Well, why do employees don't feel accountable? Well, they don't trust management, that management would actually accept when they fail, because management did not accept failure. And then I started asking about a constructive disagreement, which, is the type of disagreement you need to be able to hold in order to be creative and productive. Well, because we don't trust each other on what happens outside of the conference room. And they keep using that word, trust, 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 trust. And I'm going home and I'm starting to think, you know what? I think I'm onto something, but more than that, I think I need to get off something.
Hmm.
Because what I realized was, when you try to help a company be more innovative, productive, it's like starting to build a building from the second floor. You don't start with the second floor. The first floor is the culture, the innovation
Yeah.
culture, which is not a culture only for innovation. It's innovation, productivity, and a lot of other good things. But you don't even start building a building from the first floor. You start with the foundation. The foundation is trust. And so at that point, I started doing some research and finding that there's a critical mass of how I look at trust. And I have a very different, very unique perspective on trust than everything you probably read before. which I've put together finally in the Book of Trust. That's actually the name of the book, the big book. But at that point, I went to 20 of my friends and family members and asked them, what do you think I should do? I mean, I'm kind of in a fork in the road. I've been researching, talking, writing about innovation for so many years, and now I'm hitting this thing called trust. What do you think I should do? Should I stick with innovation or switch to trust? 19 out of 20 said stick with innovation. So I switched to trust.
Does that makes sense? The contrarian.
Yeah,
So
I do that too.
yes, and so just digging into trust, I know that, I mean, trust is a seems to be extremely foundational. I mean, if you don't have that, you don't have a lot. You don't, as far as relationships are built on trust. But I know that your background is very diverse. I mean, you're not just a scientist and technologist, but you've been a soldier and a strategist. So what are those different environments? What did you learn in those different environments about trust specifically?
Well, every environment is different. Obviously, the technology environment, I kind of gave the whole in the brainstorming
Yeah.
process. I'm not the smartest person. I'm not the most creative person. What really helps me is if I can talk to other people and we kind of bounce ideas off of each other. But in order to do that, you need to be able to hold what I called before a constructive disagreement. Um, Now, a constructive disagreement is where I can ask stupid questions, suggest stupid ideas. I don't have to worry about what you're going to do outside of the conference room, what you're going to say, who you're going to tell. Um, but what I found was that there's a range of the type of disagreements that we can hold. And so, on one hand, the disagreements can get to become personal, irrational, emotional instead of passionate, and that's when the disagreement becomes it's not a constructive, it's a destructive disagreement now. This is where everything is, it's not that you have a stupid idea, it's that you are stupid. But then there is the flip side to it, which unfortunately we see a lot more today, and that's the politically correct disagreement. This is when, you have the meeting before the meeting after the meeting, just not the meeting during the meeting.
Mm.
And so that was about the time, it was, I believe, 2017, 8 years ago, that I started doing research and started comparing high trust environment to low trust environment. And one of the things I found was that this ability that you have to ask stupid questions, to suggest stupid ideas, in general, I would call it vulnerability or willingness to be vulnerable in a meeting, it goes up 240%, Sam, in a high trust environment. 240%, more than 3 times higher than in a low trust environment. And I'm not talking the absolute low trust. I'm just talking higher quartile of creativity versus the lower quartile of creativity. So only 50% between the two. So 240% higher willingness to be vulnerable, 106% more willing to give you the feedback that you need to hear, as opposed to what I think you want to hear, which
Yeah.
is not productive, and 76% more receptivity to getting that kind of feedback. And because I trust you that you're saying this to help me and not to hurt me.
Hmm.
So I found very, very strong correlations between trust and that ability to hold that constructive disagreement, and a dramatic correlation between that and a culture of productivity and creativity.
So, and I get that. I mean, I get that trust is the building block where all this innovation takes place. But what I would like to dig into is just the fundamentals, because there's something that exists. I mean, the reason why I brought up, your past and when you were younger as a soldier and so forth. I mean, and I one thing I also noticed that you've jumped out of a plane before, Yoram. So it takes a lot of guts and trust to be able to be able to do that. Trust in the people that are building the infrastructure and packing the chute, for instance, and the trust of your colleagues and so forth. I mean, so when we're looking about what is the first step a leader should take to establish trust among their team, What is that? What is that factor that gives people that confidence?
So I'm going to give you a. You already saw that I'm a contrarian. I'm going to give you the answer that you didn't expect. The first step in becoming a good leader is asking, "Can I be a good leader?"
Hmm. Okay.
Because not everybody can. You heard of the Peter principle, right? A person would get promoted to their level of incompetence, and we do that a lot. We look at leadership as a promotion instead of as a profession. We need to look at leadership as a profession. So one of the things that happens is you take your best salesperson, right, and you turn them into the leader of the sales team, except that this will always remain the best salesperson that you have.
Hmm.
So nobody else would live up to their standards. Now the question is, do you have what it takes to say, I get that you're not in my standard of salesmanship. My role here is not to it's not to criticize you, it is to mentor you, it is to grow you into that position. The other thing is, you have to trust them. So one of, and I say you have to trust them as if this is something that's within your control. And that's the thing; it's not necessarily within your control. You know, one of the examples that I give is. I'm going to ask you a series of questions. When my daughter, my older daughter, who's now 26, when she was about a year old, that's when she lifted herself from the floor, and instead of crawling, she learned how to stand.
Yeah.
And once she was stable enough standing, she started practicing walking. And
Hmm.
after she mastered walking, what do you think was the next thing she tried? She tried what?
Running.
Running, exactly. Well, what do you think happened the first time she tried running?
She probably fell flat on her
She
face.
fell flat on her face. And what's the first thing that she did when she fell?
She was upset, I
No,
imagine.
she wasn't.
No, she was not.
No,
She got back up.
no, she didn't. The first thing that Maya did was she turned around and she looked at me.
Yeah.
Because if my reaction would have been,
Yeah.
she would obviously start crying because something
Exactly.
terrible must have happened. And if my reaction would have been, get up, keep going, she would get up and go because obviously nothing terrible had happened. Trust works that way too. See, we talk about the reciprocity of trust as if you trust me, I'll trust you. That, by the way, doesn't work. I found 8 laws of trust. That's trust law number 4. Trust
Hmm.
is asymmetrical. The level of trust you have in me and the level of trust I have in you are not related, are almost completely unrelated.
Hmm.
But the reciprocity of trust is that if I trust you and I show you that I trust you, you will behave in a trustworthy way, because otherwise it's a terrible feeling to know that somebody trusts you and you don't believe that you earn or deserve that level of trust. So what are you going to do? That's called cognitive dissonance. What are you going to do? You're going to work harder to earn the trust that's already given to you.
Hmm.
So if you trust your employee ahead of the level of trustworthiness that they have, they will work to earn that level of trust that you put in them. By the way, unfortunately, it works the other way around too. If you don't trust them and you show them that you don't trust them, or even if you trust them but you don't show them that you trust them, they're not going to behave in a trustworthy way. They're not going to try to earn your trust because there is no point. Why should I? You don't trust me anyway.
Hmm.
Now, the two extremes obviously are going to be start with zero trust, which is never something a leader should do. If this is where you are, don't be a leader. And I'll get back to that. The other is start with 100% blind trust, trust them with everything. That's risky. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. That doesn't matter how good you are as a leader. That's not the smart thing to do, to trust them without any limit.
Right.
What I'm saying to leaders is trust your employees slightly ahead of the level of trust that they demonstrated. What you're going to do is you're going to pull them to work towards the level of trust that you have in them. Then you're going to get slightly ahead of it again, trusting them with more things that they don't necessarily think that they can do, but they are going to earn that trust, and you're going to pull them higher rather than lower. I
Hmm.
told you I'm going to get back to start with zero trust. This is trust law number 8. Trust law number 8 is that the level of trust that I have in you is the product of your trustworthiness and my trustfulness.
Hmm.
It's not enough for you to be trustworthy. I may not be trusting people in general, people like you in particular. You know how I'm sure if I ask you, you can think of certain type of people and you're going to say, I don't trust them, or I don't trust people at all. And some people have an issue trusting other people.
Yeah.
If you have that issue, you're not going to be able to be ahead of your employees' trustworthiness. You're always going to be behind. You should not be a leader.
Right.
So, you asked me what is the first thing that a leader can do to earn the trust of their employees, is to ask themselves, can I trust my employees even slightly ahead of the level of trustworthiness, or do I have a trust issue? And
Hmm.
Sam, it's not you, it's me. Recognize it and just say, I don't want to be a leader. By the way, that's something that happened to me. It
What's that?
happened to I was when I started with Texas Instruments back in 2002 in California. I had an individual contributor role. I was responsible for the technology strategy around Wi-Fi specifically. I served
Yeah.
on the board of the Wi-Fi Alliance. That's what you alluded to in before. And then I remember living in California. My wife asked if Texas Instruments, they're in Dallas. Are we going to move to Dallas? And I said, oh, no, that's not going to happen. And she said, what if they offer you to run 100? She didn't say 100 million. She said, what if they offer you to run a business unit, but the business unit is in Dallas, you have to move? And I told her, I don't see that happening. Nobody's going to ask me to come to Dallas. A year and 5 months after I joined TI, I was asked to move to Dallas and run a $100 million business unit with 89 people. Now, would you say no? No. I mean, this is, you're on your way to become the next CEO. So you're going to move. But I forgot the fact that I had trust issues and that I really, really enjoyed being an individual contributor. I moved over. I led that team for a year, just over a year, and I was a terrible leader. The unit has grown, the business has grown, but it wasn't because of me. It was in spite of me. It was because I had 4 very good people working right underneath me that managed to deal with my shortcomings, and I happened to have a very good market in 2004. So plus, one of our customers was Apple, and they came up with this weird device that could play music on, a hard drive. It was
Yeah.
kind of weird, and they thought they were going to be very successful if they launch a music store
Mm.
with it. Sounded crazy, but they went from less than 1 million units to more than 16 million in 1 year, and I had components in that device. That's why the unit was doing well, not because I was a good leader.
Mm.
My boss sent me to the Center for Creative Leadership in Colorado
Ah.
Springs, and I went there for a week. And after a week, I sat with a psychologist who asked me, "Are you?" She said, "Let's frame our conversation around a question: Are you a startup person or a large company person?" Because I've done both. I told her I had a more fundamental question that I worry about, and that is, am I a leader or an individual contributor? She said, that's a great question. Let's talk about that. We talked about that for 2 hours. We had graduation, got on a plane back to Dallas Monday morning, knocked on my boss's door, and I said, I don't want to lead the unit anymore. I'm a
Mm.
great individual contributor. I'm not a good leader. And it is, we have this stigma about doing this, about demotion, that
Yeah.
very few people would recognize it and do what I did.
Right. Right. Absolutely. I mean, there's that thought of failure, but in a sense that you're really doing what is going to make you successful as an individual, right? And successful for your employer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
So
But I
that's the
want to
first step.
okay.
The
But
first step is,
let's just back up just a little bit because you brought up a great example with your daughter. I mean, so in your
did I back up
situation,
enough?
what's that?
Did I back up enough?
Oh
Okay.
yes, perfect. Yes, it's just perfect. Backed up, but just enough to where I can just barely hear you there, Johan.
Welcome to my sense of humor.
Yes, yes. But anyway, so diving into this. So the first thing is being a leader means you need to be able to trust your people a little bit ahead of where they've demonstrated that competence. And so, like your daughter, who has decided to go from walking to running, and so you are standing by watching her take those first steps, into that run, and she falls flat on her face, and then she looks to you for feedback. And so that the big piece is managers to be able to give feedback effectively when a person is failed during that first time. And what is the framework or mindset that a manager should have in providing that feedback to establish trust?
Well, so actually, one of the keynotes that I give is called "Give feedback like you care, take feedback like it matters."
Yeah.
And so I separate two types of feedback. Now, when you hear the phrase constructive feedback, doesn't it sound like somebody's running their nails on a board? Constructive feedback.
Right.
Uh, but the reality is that feedback does need to be constructive. I am not a fan of the sandwich method. I'm going to give you some praise, then I'm going to stick the knife, and then I'm going to say, but let's do this again, and then close with positive. I am not a fan of that because it comes across as not being genuine. Because if I had something positive to say, I'm going to say it when it's relevant.
Mm-hmm.
I have something positive to say. Sam, you did a great job, period. And initially your employees are going to go, but
Yeah.
it's like, this is the sandwich, now
Right.
comes the meat. And I'm like, no, that's it. You did a great job. I just wanted to recognize you.
Yeah.
And after you do that on a regular basis, they go, no, this guy just tells us that we did a good job when he did a good job. And when he doesn't say we did a good job, that must mean that we didn't.
Mm.
So feedback, if you have negative, and I call it negative feedback because it's feedback that on something you need to improve.
Yeah.
But I don't refer to giving feedback in a negative way. So how do you give feedback? Well, the first thing is, if this is positive feedback, do it in front of everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Do it anytime, any place is a good time for positive feedback. If it's negative feedback on something you need to improve, then do it privately. Make sure that they are in a place and a time and a state of mind of receiving it.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, they don't have to accept it. They have to acknowledge it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you don't need to insist on them getting it. My other daughter, who's now 24, my younger one, I remember I gave her a document to proofread, and she read and she gave me feedback, and I accepted 80% of her feedback, but I didn't accept 20% of it. And she said, well, I'm not going to give you feedback anymore because you're rejecting it. I'm like, but I accepted 80%. So when you give feedback, you're not looking for commitment. What you're looking for is acknowledgement and understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you give someone feedback that makes sense, and by the way, you also want to listen to what they have to say in return. So it's like, maybe you didn't get something right on why this happened. Maybe there's something that you didn't know. So when you give that feedback, you want to hear their reaction to it. If you keep doing it and you keep giving it, especially if it's the same thing over and over again, and they couldn't convince you that your feedback is incorrect, then maybe Houston, we have a problem, and that needs to be resolved in a different way. But if you give the feedback the first time, what you're looking for is acknowledgement and understanding. You may want to ask them, read it back to me. Tell me what you got from it. Don't expect them to act on it immediately and right now, or even say, I accept, my bad, and so on. No, the idea is that you give it to them.
I see. So I think this brings up another issue. I'd love to go through just a real world example of what a lot of leaders are facing right now as far as trust and so forth in the workplace. And one of the biggest things that we've witnessed over the past few years is just the return to office. And so and a lot of this is a result of the loss of trust for people working remote. So when you have a leader that is trying to increase flexibility to be able to attract more people in the workplace, how should they be handling this remote work situation to ensure that trust is maintained?
I mean, Sam, this is like you went through my website and looked at my catalog of all the talks that the keynotes that I give, because there is a keynote that I give about maintaining trust in the remote environment. I think, first of all, we talk about going back to the office or staying away from the office and so on. I hosted a TV show it's called Perspectives Matter, and it was a program on going back to the office, on the fact that some companies, some of the biggest companies, Amazon, for example, Nokia, not Toyota, just said you're going back to the office. And one of the main reasons is because I don't trust you. I don't trust that you're going to work remotely and do it right. Well, the first thing that companies did, first of all, we didn't choose to do that.
Hmm.
March 11, the World Health, March 11, 2020, the World Health Organization declared COVID a global pandemic, and everything shut down. And the only option, if you could, was to work remotely. Now it's a lot more common. We're actually getting to the point where employees demand this. Um, the question is, will they deliver? So the first reaction that leaders and companies had was, okay, so we're going to install stuff on your computer to monitor whether you work or not. That's how we're going to know. So what did they do? They installed software that, for example, would see that your mouse is moving. How long do you think it took before YouTube videos started showing up on how you use Lego, a 3D printer, to move the mouse regularly
Yeah.
so that piece of software will report it? It's like warfare and counter warfare.
Right.
You're going to come up with something, and I'm going to come up with something in return. So, my answer to how do you know you can trust the employees, you find if you can trust them, and you can find that out based on their behavior, how they do things, and so on. There's so many parameters that would let you know that your employees are trustworthy. If you don't have employees that you can trust, monitoring is not going to solve the problem. You need
Mhm.
different employees, not a monitoring software.
But sometimes, Yoram, I mean, is it true that sometimes the leadership's own bias might fall into some of this? Let me explain. I'm not just talking about bias in the fact of whether they want a person to be in line of sight or not, but sometimes if we are not measuring things effectively and we're just going based on what we're seeing, sometimes that feedback can take us down a path that may not be truthful. So if we're looking for certain behaviors and looking for what we are traditional signs of success, ha- uh, how does metrics? I mean, metrics seems like it is a way to define proven performance. If you have somebody that's consistently meeting a goal and doing it over and over again, it would seem to increase my trust that that person can do that again and again and again.
So now we're kind of going into my model of, and I have something that I call the relative trust model, and it
Mhm.
has six components, six main components. One of them is made of two. And I'm going to touch on the components on the right side. If you go to my website, trusthabits.com, you're going to find the model there. And there are three components that I refer to as who you are, or
Mm.
what do I know about you. The first component is competence. This is objective, this is technical, professional, um, and pretty universal, although it would vary with job and obviously level in the organization. So you just mentioned it, a person that keeps on meeting their goals, a person that has the right education, that has the right experience, and so on. That component, you can rank them pretty high on competence. The second is a little more, I'm going to say, touchy feely. It's more subjective, and it's a lot more relative. And believe it or not, it's not relative to the employee; it's relative to me, and that is what I called personality compatibility.
Okay.
Not every two people can work together. Not every two people can work together. So one of the things in one of my earlier research surveys on trust, I found that the highest correlation to trust is what I call shared values. The fact that we
Mhm.
share the same values, because we have values, you have values, and specifically we're going to talk about work values. Unfortunately, today, other values that have absolutely no place in the workplace are starting to get into the into the workplace. Things like politics. I'm not going to trust you because of who you voted for.
Yeah.
We cannot have the same values because of who you voted for. That does not belong there, but unfortunately does play a role.
Mhm.
um, and I actually had an employee resign without notice because she realized that she's on the other side of the political spectrum than where I am, even though I don't think that there's really another side to where I am, because I'm pretty much right there in the middle.
Yeah.
I vote for both candidates from both major parties. But anyway, I digress. So shared values in the context of the workplace. I'll give you an example. I'll give you a story. You seem to like stories.
Yes.
So, my boss, when I was running that business unit, my boss at TI, every time I would go to her with an idea, uh, before, let me step back for a second. Sam, if I need to convince you with something, what would you rather me, or what is the order in which you want me to do things? Do you want me to give you the bottom line and then justify it? Or do you want me to take you through the thought process and only at the end tell you and therefore give you the bottom line? Which one do you
Uh,
prefer?
so deductive or inductive. So I would like to understand the output first, and
The bottom line.
and then give me the details of why you support that.
So you're like me and 76% of the population.
Mhm.
76% of and this is my own survey. 76% prefer the bottom line first and then justify it. Not my boss.
Mhm.
Every time I went there, I would start with the bottom line because that's what works for me. And I could tell on her face, Sam, that she would have an immediate allergic reaction to what I had to say. And then I would justify it, and it's just not enough. It's just not good enough. She already, you can tell she already made up her mind against what I had. So that happened more and more and more. And at some point, I asked her, when I come to when I'm trying to convince you with something, would you rather me give you the bottom line first, which is what I typically do, and then justify it? Or would you rather take you through my thought process and only at the end give you, and therefore, here's the bottom line? She said the latter. Well, there's only
Yeah.
17% in the population that prefers the latter. And I thought that's very interesting. So because of this mismatch in our personalities, we had a hard time communicating. We had a hard relationship. Well, so what happens when either you as the leader or you as the employee find that there is this mismatch in personality? There is a personality incompatibility. And obviously I'm talking about something relatively small, but it was big enough because
Yeah.
we're dealing with projects that are measured in tens and hundreds of millions of dollars. So first, you need to recognize that there is this mismatch, this incompatibility. Second, you have to ask yourself or the other person, are we willing to change it? Am I willing to change how I do things? And the third one, can I? Do I
Mhm.
have the capacity to change it? Because, there are going to be things you're going to ask me. I'm left handed. I don't know about you, Sam. Are you left handed or right handed?
I'm right-handed.
Well, there's 90% of the population are right-handed, 10% are
Mm.
left-handed. So this is why I'm going to beat you in tennis, just so that you know, because you're not used to playing
I
left-handed.
guarantee that you're going to beat me in tennis there, Yoram.
But regardless, so if you told me that in order for me to get along with my boss, I need to switch to right-handed, we fail on capacity. I don't
Right.
have the capacity, the capability to change that. But instead of starting with the bottom line and then justifying it, taking her to the thought process and at the end saying, and therefore giving her the bottom line, that I can do
Yeah.
within my capacity. I had the willingness to do that. So I changed it and we started getting along.
Mhm.
Amazing little thing, but that's how you find this personality incompatibility that was important enough for her to say no to things And if you can fix it, then all of a sudden there is a personality compatibility. And as I said, 86% correlation between that and trust.
So the important part is to ensure that we are doing our homework with individuals on how to establish the grounds of success in building trust.
Which brings a very important point. I told you that when I started, I wasn't going to pursue the topic of trust. By the way, I'm very committed to the topic of trust. You
Hmm.
know how you can tell that somebody is very committed to the topic?
How's that, Yoram?
It's tattooed on my arm. The word trust is tattooed on my
That
arm.
is commitment for
That's
sure.
commitment, because that tattoo is not coming down.
Yeah.
This, as I found, well, I didn't find out. As I was told, taking it down is a lot more painful than putting it on. And let me tell you something: putting it on does not feel like puppies are licking your arm.
Yes.
So I'm committed to that, and the reason is, okay. Now I lost my track. Oh yes, so I told you that I'm not going to commit to a topic, or I wasn't going to commit unless I had a very unique perspective. And I
Mhm.
told you at the beginning that I have a unique perspective. One of the most important parts, or the uniqueness of how I look at trust, is that I look at trust as relative. We look at trust typically as a list of things, a checklist. Here are the items. If you can check all of them, you're going to be trusted. If you can check all of them, the fewer that you can check, the less you're going to be trusted. Doesn't work that way. You see, if the same behavior that can make one person trust you could make another person distrust you. The same behavior. I don't know if we have time. If we have time, I can tell you a story about that.
Oh yeah, tell me, tell me.
Okay, here's the story. So I think you already know that I'm also a professor of entrepreneurship at SMU. And one day, my daughter, when she was signing up for classes, she goes to this website called ratemyprofessors.com. Never heard of that site. I asked her, what's in there? Well, students anonymously post reviews of their professors. And I
Right.
thought, that's brilliant. But wait a minute. I'm a professor. Is there a page with my name? Because I didn't create a page. So I went there and I found a page with my name. And I started looking, and the first one said, I got 5 out of 5. Professor Solomon is awesome. If you want to start a business, and I teach entrepreneurship. If you want to start a business and he's giving you very powerful feedback and so on, I'm awesome. But here's the second one. The second gives me 1 out of 5. And it says 1 out of 5 is awful. He's arrogant, condescending, but he's a good grader, which is, the only thing that matters in college, right? Well, but here's the interesting thing. Both those reviews were given within 10 days of one another.
Huh.
I used to teach at that time only one class per semester. This was 2019, so it's before COVID. There was no hybrid. There was no Zoom that we used. This was in the classroom. 10 days apart, these two students sat at the same classroom, at the same class. I was obviously the same person. How come one of them gives me 5 out of 5 and the other gives me 1 out of 5? And you already know that it's not the grade, because even the one giving me 1 out of 5 said he's an easy grader. It's because of that personality compatibility, and it's
Yeah.
because of this relativity of trust. The
Mhm.
same behavior that would cause one person to trust you could cause another person to distrust you. Trust is not absolute, it is not universal, it is relative. And to the point that you just said before I started talking endlessly with the story, is that you have to know who the other person is and you have to do your homework.
Yes. Well, Yoram, I want to make sure that we have time to go through a couple of questions that were brought up to me by
Lightning round.
yes. So one is the first one is, once a person comes in the door, you have a new candidate you just hired, and you have this specific time frame to build that trust with this candidate. What can leaders do in the first 90 days to ensure that they're establishing that trust?
The same thing they need to do in the first second.
Hmm.
Be genuine.
Be
Be
genuine.
yourself. Okay, I'm going to show you the other tattoo. So I just got, last week, I got a second tattoo. That's it. That's all I have. I have 2 tattoos. And this is one of the 6 components I told you about of trust. Are you ready?
Yes. Let's see the next
The
one.
other arm,
No BS.
no BS. No BS. Everybody is born with a very elaborate BS detector.
Yes.
Don't BS. Say what you mean what you say. Don't be mean when you say it. Um, you know, I tell people when I'm not happy with them, unsolicited. I tell people when I am happy with them,
Yeah.
unsolicited. When I say something, this is what it is. I'm not trying to sugarcoat things. I typically ask someone before I give them that feedback, do you want me to tell you when somebody comes to me and says, what do you think about this? My answer is, do you want me to tell you the truth or do you want me to sugarcoat it? I've still yet to have to hear the first person say, oh, please sugarcoat it, lie to me. Telling the truth is a big part of it, not hiding behind things. One of the things that leaders tend to do, and God, I've been on the receiving end of that so many times, is the other people said that. OPST. Other people said that. No, I own the feedback that I'm going to give you. This is what I feel. I may be wrong, by the way. Correct me, but this is what I feel.
Hmm.
You know what? If you can do that, if you can be yourself, if you can avoid BS, one more element I'm going to say is empathy. Again, this is all from my model.
Yeah.
Empathy, and empathy means empathy is not pity, it's not sympathy, it's not compassion. Empathy is my ability to see things from your perspective as if I were you, because you and I are not the same people.
Hmm.
And if I think of myself in your shoes, that's not how I need to look at you. I need to look at you as, knowing what I know about you, how do you see what just happened or what's about to happen? So that's empathy. One more component, and that is the time and intimacy. Spend time with them, intimate. And when I say intimate, what I mean is in person.
Yeah.
The second best alternative is Zoom or any other video conferencing, because the consistency between your words and your body language tells them if you're lying or not.
Mm. Yes. I can see that. So making sure that you have that one-on-one time can be very valuable for
Yes.
leaders, for sure. So as we wrap up here, Yoram, I mean, what are the top things that you want our leaders that are listening in to walk away with from this discussion?
Number one is, well, it's a little tricky, because if you're already an established leader, that number one is a little tricky. And I typically I refer to it as number zero. It comes even
Yeah.
before number one, and that is, ask yourself, do I want to be a leader? Should I be a leader? And especially if I don't trust people, if I have trust issues, you should not be a leader. You know what? Maybe you already are a leader and you're having trust issues. Maybe that's the time to step back and say, you know what? I'm going to go against the grain. I'm going to get away from this stigma of the demotion, but I should not be a leader. I need to think about my employees and I need to think about the company before I think about the prestige and my ego of being a leader.
Mhm.
If I am a leader that is relatively successful, or let's say not terrible, then just own what you tell your employees. Be genuine, no BS. See things from their perspective as if you were them, because you're not them. You may be driving a BMW, your employee is driving a beat up Toyota, and you're going to tell them something that really makes a lot more sense if they replace a BMW every 3 months, but they don't. There is
Yeah.
the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You must be up there in trying to fulfill your destiny while they're trying to make rent. So you have to be able to see things from their perspective. And as we said, the third one is spend time with them. And there is no substitute to spending time in person.
Hmm. Thank you, Yoram. Now, one other thing I know that there's many of our leaders are it's like, well, how can I learn more? And you're on one of the great skill sets you have is that you're a prolific writer. You mean you write like crazy? I think you're on your 20th book that you have right now.
No, no, no. 20 is already out.
Uh,
21 and 22.
you're
21 and 22 are coming out next month.
That's great. So tell us a little bit about your new releases that are coming out.
Well, actually, the new release came from. I woke up one morning and I said, my class at SMU needs a textbook, but it's not about trust. It's about evaluating ideas because the BS spills across how we evaluate ideas and determine what's good or what's bad because we don't like to hear that our baby is ugly. And
Mm,
so that's what this book and the workbook. That's how it's two books. Um, the last one was actually about trust as professionals. Specifically the fact that people are buying from people they trust and they're even willing to pay a premium.
yeah.
uh, and so why is it, how do you calculate it, how does it apply to your industry? But I think if what you have is leaders, then there are going to be a few books that I would recommend. Obviously, there is the Book of Trust, and the
Mhm.
Book of Trust, I need to show you the side, is 550 pages.
Wow. Yeah.
When I wrote the Book of Trust, somebody asked me, "How do you expect anyone to read 550 pages? It's cruel and unusual punishment." And I don't. I also have. Oops, where is it? I have the mini Book of Trust somewhere here. And the mini book of trust is a 180-page version of it. It's a
Mm,
lot easier to read. It's the same content, but without all the research behind it, without the depth. So just get the concepts there. A few of the other books that can really help are, I have a series of mini books called Can I Trust You? And they're for different roles. So one of them is for consultants, advisors, project managers, leaders,
mm,
team members, and salespeople. And finally, one other book that I would recommend, and this is the first time that I ever wrote a book about trust or had the word trust in a book. I shouldn't say it wasn't a book about trust. Is Culture Starts with You, Not Your Boss.
nice. Lots of content there for sure. Well, Yoram, I thank you once again for joining us here today on the People Strategy Forum. Really appreciate you sharing all this knowledge with us.
Thank you for giving this focus to the trust in the workplace.
Yes, for sure. And so, for all of you leaders out there that are listening in, we'll see you next week on the People Strategy Forum. All right, take care.